And it's links right here. Oh, there we go. Now we have sound. What did
Okay, now it works. So here's the thing. There's a button here, on off button. That's the one I play with. This one right there. Right there.
Oh yeah, I've done this. All right, I think we're in business. If you have dialed in, if you'll let me know that you can hear us, or hear me rather, just type a little note and say yes. Lisa, can you see the screen? It's a PowerPoint slide that says Introduction to Job Searching. Lisa, can you see a screen now? Lisa, I think that you can hear me, but if you're not seeing a screen, I do need to go ahead and start, but I will let you know that what you're not seeing are just PowerPoint slides that follow right along with all the information that we will be going through. So you won't have anything pretty to look at, but you'll have the same information, and we're going to go ahead and get started here. So we're just going to take a couple minutes in our classroom here to introduce. So hi, everybody. I'd just like to have you have a chance to introduce yourself, and maybe if you'll just tell your name, what program you're in, or in Isaac's case, he's a graduate, and tell what you're looking to do in the future, what kind of area or industry you want to take your new education into. Okay, so we'll start with Anna.
Thank you. I'm Martinez. I am in medical terminology, coding, and insurance area. And I'm hoping to take it either to a clinic, private doctor's office, or maybe a hospital. I haven't decided that part yet. It's very big, but that's the direction I'm hoping to take it.
Lots of good choices. Yeah, all right, good. Isaac.
All right, I'm Isaac Mars. I recently graduated and got my CompTIA and MCTS certificates. And so now I'm hoping to move on and go into computer repair support. And got some, start doing some informational interviews coming up this Monday, so hopefully those go well and everything. So that's where I'm headed with that. I'm going to start with like a small business, kind of thing, where it's not like a huge corporation. So that's where I'm headed for that.
So Isaac said a really great part of job searching, informational interviewing, and we'll cover that as we move through the weeks here. All right, next, Debbie. Ditto. Okay. Would you do me the hugest favor and move in that chair so I can see you? Thank you. Thank you, Clarissa.
I am Clarissa.
taking the program with Anna and Deborah, medical coding, and I had worked at the hospital base for 20 some years. So it is an extension for me, this program. So what I'm looking for is like eyesight because of staying away from the cochlear. I'm not probably using this and as I said, it's an extension from my class. So
Lisa, we'll have no audio here for just a moment as the class people in the classroom are introducing themselves. Sorry, go ahead. Thank you. Sorry, we're having a little technical difficulty. Okay, Oksana.
I want to be a graphic designer. Actually, my part-time office administrator and graphic designer. I think it's really nice because I'm starting office, so office administrator and move to a graphic designer when they have this position available if they don't have it. Okay. So just so happy that I have this opportunity to learn this learn this career, to be in this career. Yeah.
I like your well-rounded perspective of how you can grow in your work. That's great.
I'm Donna, and I'm taking the certified bookkeeping. So I'm in the process of changing careers from an interior designer.
Wow, that's really different, isn't it? Oh. Interior designer to bookkeeping, accounting.
Yeah. So I probably am still going to do some of that,
Yeah.
but I'm going to incorporate the bookkeeping. My husband's also a general contractor, so I do a lot of his books also. And I've done a lot of management in corporate with that. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be going into freelancing and just doing it books for other small businesses. And so I'm not quite sure where I'm going with it, but I need to. I want to get certified and everything. So I have more opportunities, more, because the economy it fluctuates so much. So I need to be able to do multiple things. So that's what I'm considering.
Good open-mindedness there too. Lisa, if you will tell us, just even though you're typing, I will relay it to the people in the classroom here. What program you're in, where do you live, and what are you looking forward to doing once you finish school? What are you looking forward to doing with your education? We'll give her a minute to type that. I want to make sure everybody has a binder. If not, there are some on the back table. Did you take one? Okay, thank you. And you can open your binders to section 1. And what we're going to do here, as soon as Lisa types in, then I'll tell you a little bit about me and about the binders. Yes. The end. All right, I'll keep watching the screen here, Lisa, to see if you type something in. I'm going to go on and start with a little more info here. So my name is Cindy Czoeller, and my desk is right in here in that little office right there. So anytime that I can help you with anything, job search or otherwise, there's where I am Monday through Thursday. I'm not here on Fridays. And I've been at OSC for just about 1 year, but I've known of OSC for many years. Prior to coming here, I was self-employed for about 10 years, working with adults with Asperger's syndrome who were working toward going on for schooling and on into employment. And so I came to know of OSC because I had someone who was a client of mine, and they became a student here. So the first time I ever came in and sat down with my client and sat down with John, I just have to tell you that I was in love with OSC. So I just really value their mission. The majority of students here are a little bit older and are, for the most part, career changers. And I think that's can be an exciting time in life, and that can be a scary time in life. So I think that a couple things that I just really focus on in doing this career services work, which I started like decades ago, just through different forms in my life. One time when I was a stay-at-home homeschooling mom, I also just had a home-based resume writing business and job search coaching. And so that was like the 10 years before the 10 years that I was working with folks with Asperger's. So I just realized when I first stepped into the working in the field of employment and job search training, two things. First of all, these are lifetime skills. You know, as much as any of us in the room might like to think that from the next job we have until forever, we're going to have the same job. We're never going to have another interview or search for a job again. But for most of us, it's probably not true. You might be in this again. So just working on this job search training is really building lifetime skills, things that you'll use again. And a lot of job search information and the way that you go about things is what I call like timeless. It's classic. It doesn't change that much, some parts of it, but some parts since I started in this field have changed dramatically. Like, barely even had computers running and now back then, and now you got to do your job search basically through a computer. So lots of changes, but lots of things that are still really the same. So I encourage you to keep this notebook. Once you're done with the series here or you've graduated and you even have a job, keep this, because as we move through this binder, you'll see that a lot of parts that I've set up in here are for you to keep using it and building. So this can become that little place where you think, oh, I need to store that record, or I need to capture that piece of information and write it down. Well, this is a place that you can do that. And should you find yourself in a job search again in the future, then you know right where you can go to retrieve. I'm always amazed people come in and they have notebooks full of all every review they've ever had, every pay increase. They've like kept this from the beginning, and that's because I haven't even done that. So like it amazes me. It's great, and it's so helpful when you've got to go back and work on this stuff again. So something else I want to say about this binder, these workshops are not just sit and listen types of things. Every time we're together, we have things that we're going to work on, and each week builds on the topic that's coming. So today we're talking about some real foundational things about having a strategic job search and about getting a record keeping system set up. Who likes to be nice and organized in stuff? Well, that's really helpful in a job search because, sometimes you can be scrambling around trying to find that little piece of paper that you wrote that guy's name on that you met last Thursday at the grocery store because he knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that might be helpful in your job search. So there's a system in here that you can use, and I just encourage you to get it all set up and started before you ever start your job search. So there's a lot of things in the job search steps and process that you can start working on before you ever start the official job search day. Getting all this foundational stuff set really can relieve a lot of stress. So in addition to this information being information that you can use to build these lifetime skills, everything in here, feel free to photocopy it. There's forms and things to do all the way through, and just photocopy what's ever in here as much as you need or want to. It's yours to do that with. And you can just add the pages as you go. And as you see here on your tabs, there's tabs 1 through 8. And behind tab number 8 is empty. And it's left that way to be a storage place for you. So as we move through and you work on different handouts in here on different topics, and you want just a place to remember where it is, not like, oh, I got to go dig through my whole binder to try and find that piece of paper that I wrote that stuff on. Behind tab 8 is a place that you can just pull it out of your binder and stick it back there, and you have an easy reference. So before we just take a real quick look under tabs 1 through 7, I would like you to open to under tab number 1. And as we move along, I'll continuously be saying what page we're on or what the title is at the top of the page. I'm not the best slide button pusher. I try to keep up with myself, but I will admit that sometimes, they didn't have PowerPoint back then. So I'd like you to go to the very last page in your handout of section 1. And up at the top it says online job search, search username and passwords. But I want you to go to the front side of the, oh no, I'm going to talk about this one first, sorry. This is a page for you to keep track of the different websites that you go to in your job search. Again, you could photocopy this, but a lot of the online sites tell you how you have to construct your username and password. So like I use the same password for everything in my entire life. Okay, no problem, I can remember that. So what happens to the day I'm hacked? But a lot of times these sites will not let you do that. So this is a place to keep track of that, okay? And this itself could go under tab number 8 as a storage thing. I'll tell you another thing that I do, and I've done this for years and it works great. You go to the dollar store and you get one of those little address books that are alphabetized, and you can do the same thing in there. So it's really handy, really easy to do. But there's a place for you to keep track of those things. If you'll turn to the front side of that page, which is page 33, one thing that I want to sort of help plant in your mind is that between now, like starting today, and the time that you finish school, we typically try to get people into the career service workshops anywhere like 12 to 14 weeks before you graduate, so that you have like 7 weeks to be, do you have a funny printing thing? It's going to look like this. It's very full page. Oh, yours got off printing somehow. That's it. It's a page on your left. Yeah. Oh, rats. We had an update from Windows to Windows 10 and is messing up a lot. And Cindy spent a lot of hours last week having to fix this, but it looks like it didn't print. Somewhere in there you must have a blank page. Okay. So that's why I tell you the title at the top. Okay. The title of this page says Job Search Weekly Roadmap. Begin week of, and this is the week of the 10th, October 10th. And you can put that on your, fill that in on the date at the top. Begin week of October 10th. I just want to plant a suggestion in your mind that between now and graduation, you spend approximately, some days it'll be way less, some days it might be near that, but about 1 hour a day on your job search, getting ready. Because the things that are on this page, if you get all of these things done, the day you decide to start job searching, you'll have all of your foundational work ready. You won't be scrambling to try to catch up with yourself to get going, okay? So I'll give you an example. There's 13 weeks of suggested things that you could do at 1 hour a day, Monday through Friday. And you'll see up there on the upper left, it says week 1. And it says attend CSW, that's Career Service Workshop. So for those of us that like to put little check marks by things we've accomplished, there's a little box for you to do that. So right there, you can put a check mark next to attend Career Service Workshop, because you're doing that right now. So today is your, your hour for this day and this week. And next it says complete Career Service Workshop assignment. For most every week, I do have something that I ask you to work on between the workshop and the next week. We will have started it in the workshop, but likely not finished it. And again, 1 week topic builds into other weeks that are coming. So completing it has a value to you. Next, prepare the job search binder with A to Z tabs. So here's how I look at that. Go to Walmart, get a notebook thicker than this, like a 1.5 inch, and get one of those packets of A to Z tabs. Stick them in your notebook. There is your hour of that day accomplished, okay? Combine it with your grocery trip or whatever. But that's a great thing to start with, because as you start gathering information related to your job search, now you have a filing place to put things. And alphabetical is usually easier, whether you're filing it alphabetically by the name of somebody you've met or filing it alphabetically by the name of a company you've applied for. And then next, it says review ONET Online and complete the handout. ONET Online is a website that we're going to look at today in the class, and then I'll talk to you and give you some information about what I'd like you to do on that website. And then it says fill out master application. So we have a master job application in here, and that's just a place for you to be able to go and gather all the information that you're going to need on filling out applications in the future. And so this is a gives you time to do it leisurely. If you've got to go dig around in ancient history to find something, piece of information that you need, you have time to do it. And then you have a place to keep it, all the information that you need. So it's a heck of a lot easier and less stressful to copy application information to the application you're filling out, whether it's an online form or a paper form, than it is to sit and try to rethink everything every time. Like, oh yeah, what was the month and year that I started that job 20 years ago? You know, so copying quicker and less stressful. All right, so let's go back to the beginning of this section. And we're just going to take a really quick run through each tab here. So this week, again, we're starting off with some introduction types of ideas and concepts to get your job search going and to get it organized. And then under tab 2, the second week, next week, we're going to work on creating your professional profile. And we'll do several activities that will have you do some writing, thinking and writing, to make notes for yourself about soft skills that you have, transferable skills that you have. Those are skills and abilities that you have that no matter what sort of job you had, what sort of work you were doing or industry that you worked in, you bring those skills with you because they're an inherent part of you. You know, some things that we're just born with and other types of abilities that we develop and strengthen. And so we're going to do some activities that will help you put together information about accomplishments that you've had, again, your soft skills, transferable type of skills from your background, and all this information will, a lot of it will end up on your resume and a lot of it will end up in your interviewing. And then under tab 3, week 3 is when we start working on developing your resume and a cover letter. So this is my disclaimer. I hate writing cover letters. Who loves that?
I have a template.
Yay. But you still have to change it every time you're going to.
Only the pertinent stuff.
Yeah.
Usually, unless there's something really dynamic about the position, I just use the same one with the same enthusiasm. And
Yes.
just put in the company.
Yeah. So I like what you're saying because writing the first few is different than writing the ones that come after that. You know, once you got 2 or 3 of them under your belt, you realize you basically have 3 paragraphs. First paragraph doesn't change much except for the title of the job. Third paragraph doesn't change much except for maybe a date or something. It's just the middle paragraph you have to really focus on, and that's the part where you're selling yourself and deciding what seems to be the most important to this potential employer to sell yourself.
I always found the last paragraph closing seems to be like, how do I finish this off? And I found a creative way to do it, but that's after trying and trying.
Yeah. So maybe you'll share your way with us when we get there. And then it depends on, you know, what you plan to do as the next step as well, how you might change that up. Okay. And once we have our workshop week 3 on developing your resume is when I'll ask you to start sending an email copy of the resume that you already have, what you want to start off with, email it to me so that I can look at it and then I'm able to keep an electronic copy, because every once in a while I will work with you to work on it, but every once in a while I just see something, it's like, let me just change that, because it's easier for me to just do something and then tell you and send you a copy than to maybe write it all out sometimes. It just varies. So it's just a real easy way for us to work together on your resume, just starting off with emailing. And then I like to meet with everyone individually and go over your resume, and we work on it together until you say, yes, that is a good representation of me. I feel good about that. Okay? So, huh? Yeah, and I'm just going to tell, for like several times in a couple week period, Isaac's resume kept coming to my mind. I was just like, there's just something, there's just something, there's just something. And I went back and I really scoured through, and he had his whole resume done and then decided he was going to add a section, some additional information, but it was in a different font. And that's what was like at the back of my mind. That I didn't pinpoint it thinking, but I'm like, there's something. And I went back and I'm looking, I'm like, that's a different font. Yeah. But there was just this little tiny, yeah. So it was like nagging at me. So anyway, we don't stop until you're totally satisfied and you feel ready to send it out. Okay, then week 4 is interview preparation. And Now, see, Oksana was in here last time, so I'm going to tell this, but she'll have this memory. When we do our interview prep, when we get to week 7, we do mock interviews. So if you know what a mock interview is, practice interviewing, but we do it in a group because feedback that you get from each other is really helpful. I mean, that's more eyes on your practicing than just my eyes, or if you're practicing with a family member or something. So what I always find is that sometimes people sort of aren't ready for the mock interview. So I have a new thing, and you're the first group. Okay. We're actually going to do kind of a tiny mock interview practice on week 4 before we actually start the material on interview preparation, just so you can get a feel for yourself where you are. Because then when we get to week 7, it might be a little more like real and preparing. Okay. So I might sound a little mean, but I have good intentions.
It's funny, I went to a couple of interview workshops at Staff Works, and they said that the guy there said that one of the things that a lot of people get trapped in is they get trapped in answering the question instead of selling yourself as to why you need to be hired. They get trapped in so they ask the question and they get all stuck in answering the question instead of telling them why they should be hired. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, because I say the 2 most important questions to know, they're my favorite questions. You should be ready for them always. Tell me a little bit about yourself. I know grammatically not a question, and why should I hire you? That's like always to be in the back of your mind. Why should they hire me? If I can't tell you why you should hire me, then, I don't want to leave it to you to figure it out. Yeah.
In the mock interview, will you give us the topic of the job?
I will give you the week before, I will give you a job description that matches your schooling program and ask you to read it, and then I'll have a copy of it as well, and that's what we'll use as a basis when you have your hot seat chance. Okay. All right. So interview preparation, and you see at the top of that first page, this is my favorite word ever: practice, practice, practice. So for years, I facilitated a group of adults with Asperger's in a job club in San Francisco each month. And that's what I would say. Now, what's my favorite word? Practice, 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 because it just makes such a difference when you go for your interviewing. If you're not like easily a natural born talker, practicing makes all the difference, because it's one thing to think it up here. It's an entirely different thing to get it roll out of your mouth and feel comfortable and you believe yourself and you're confident. And it's practicing knowing that really creates that confidence. It's like studying for a test. You read a question and you think, yes, I know that one, right? How do you feel? Boom, a little boost of energy, right? And then you read the next one and you think, I don't think I've even ever heard of that one. How do you feel? Shut down, right? So I think interviewing and practicing getting ready gives you the same feelings. I had a student who just graduated a few weeks ago, but she really worked on her job search, I don't know, almost 2 months ago now, I guess, because she wanted to get a job before she graduated. So she had gone to an interview, and as soon as she came home, she called, and she's telling me all about it. And so she had this really long explanation, telling me everything. And then there was one thing I said, okay, so I'm so happy for you. And there's one thing that really caught my attention. And she said, I did everything you said. I went upstairs, whatever that means for her. I think it meant like a quiet, private place. And I got out all the interview questions and I practiced all of my answers out loud. And I felt so ready when I went in. And so here's the result of her interview. She was in the graphic design program, and she went to interview for a position, and she had a lot of samples of work because she did have some related background from her previous work experience. So she went with a lot of samples of her work, and when she put the sample packet down on the table, the person interviewing her picked it up and started looking through it as they were talking a little bit, and then she just stopped and she laid it back down on the table. And the OSC student, she said, my heart stopped. She said, I was sure that she doesn't if you knew this person, you know that could like not even be the truth. But she said, and then she looked up at me and she said, this interview for this position has just ended. She's like, and I knew I was right. And she said, but I'm interviewing you now for a different position. And so she was like, really? And she said, yeah, whatever the manager that would have been her boss, so and so is not going to get you. I am. She said, for a position that we don't even have a job description for yet, but I've just met the right person. So, you know, she was prepared. She had all of her samples with her, things to show. And so she was the right person in the right place at the right time. And then she said, and the best part of it is that it starts at $7,000 more a year than the other position did. So, um, she does work in the past. She did work for Indian tribal work, like business analyst, but you know, analyst for different types of topics. This is also going to be, I think it's either a nonprofit or another like government based, kind of private but government based company. So she had probably, as I recall, think about 8 years, somewhat similar related type of experience, but she'd done a lot of just a lot of the graphic design work and, you know, analysis and stuff like that. So that was very cool for her. All right, under tab number 5, we're going to talk about networking. Networking is getting out and about and talking to people. And Isaac mentioned he's going on informational interviews, which have a deep relationship to networking in that an informational interview is a time to go out and meet people who do something similar to what you want to do, or maybe they work at a company that you want to work at, and you're going to gather information that helps you learn more about that type of job or working in that field. It is also what I call like the backdoor approach to trying to get an interview, but it's less threatening because if the person that you're contacting doesn't have the authority to offer you a job or even interview you, then they might shut down on you and say, oh, too busy, I don't do that, whatever. But to use this backdoor approach, but it's not always backdoor approach, it's, you know, it's good to get out and learn, like, what do people actually do in this kind of job day in and day out? What are the tasks? What do you like? What don't you like? How did you get into this? How do you grow? But to go out and know that you could be that right person in the right place, you know, so you go dress professionally, you got copies of your resume with you, and we have questions in here that you can put together, a page of questions that you can go and ask, and it's a way to just get out and meet people that have or can have some relationship to what you're looking toward doing. So it's a good way to meet people and to network, ask for referrals. If this person doesn't have a next step with you, then you ask for a couple of referrals to help yourself move on to the next person, to somebody else, to bring them into your job searching too. So that's what networking is about. And you might have heard the term the hidden job market. Like, okay, well, if it's hidden, where is it? How do I find it? And so getting out and networking is how you find it. Those are jobs that people have, like this one I just told you about. Like, we don't even have a job description yet, but we know that we're going to have a position like this. And so you're just here a little sooner than we planned, but we're going to grab you up right now that she got a job offer on the spot. So with the hidden job market, you know, we're also used to hearing about online job searching, right? And it is the least successful, statistically, the least successful way that people get jobs. Only about 4% of people get jobs through online job searching. Gee, why is it such a big deal then? The number one way is actually getting out and networking and meeting people. 75 to 80% of people get their jobs because they met somebody who knew somebody. What's that saying? It's not always what you know, it's who you know. So this is how you get some who you knows in your job search. All right, tab number 6 is using the internet. Here we're talking about the least successful way, but it's what everyone does. So using the internet in your job search. Even though you shouldn't like really be stuck on using the internet as your only form and then also how to use it as a job search tool. It's like the #1 way now. So before I mentioned, a lot of things are sort of timeless and classic in job searching, and then other things change or are cyclical. So the cycle right now is not so much like the job boards that we used to hear about, although everybody's got their online process to follow, but LinkedIn's the big job search tool right now, the #1 job search tool. So we'll get into that. And then under week 7 is your mock interview preparation packet. And so this has just some information, some reminder types of things, and then some things to help you prepare to get ready. I do ask you to dress for an interview on that day. Okay. Every once in a while, somebody has a reason that they don't or can't. Like yesterday in Stockton, a student leaves immediately to go to work, and he just doesn't really have the resource to come dressed like that and then change and go to work. So you might not necessarily be able to fit in that. That's okay. But if you do have the opportunity to do that, it's great to get those clothes on and see how you feel, and just take a dry run. And so there's some information in here as you look through this handout of things that we'll be watching for as your audience. And basically, I just sit right where Anna's sitting, and you'll sit on the other side, so you're facing out to the rest of the group. And then I have an evaluation sheet that each person will have. There's not a copy of it in here, but an evaluation sheet that will ask each person in the group to fill out as they watch you go through your mock interview. And then we have a quick verbal feedback about that. And then you get to keep the copies of the feedback yourself. Yeah.
My section for my tab 7 has state jobs and it doesn't have anything.
Oh, you have an old binder. Oh, you brought that from home, didn't you? Okay, if you have state jobs in there, we're going to start doing state job application on like a quarterly basis. This is what you want to have. So there's some notebooks on the table behind Clarissa. If you don't have that and you haven't written in your notebook, you can trade, or you can just take another one. Okay, thank you. What do you have? State. All right, why don't you grab another one? And then you'll have the mock interview packet in the back.
This on a state too.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So where's the mock interview? It's under which number?
Under 7? Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I want to just put a check mark next to you if you need the mock interview packet, and I will email it to you. Okay. Oh, let me do it this way. Who has that in the back of their notebook? You do, yes. Okay. Did you get your notebook like when you started school? That's why, because we just printed the new 7 last week. So you have the old one. So Anna, you're the only one that has the mock interview packet, right? Okay, so here's my big old note to myself.
I was just earlier, we're all trading them and we're like, what?
I know, then we'll have to no, we'll just take these and put 7, fill in 7 mock interview packet. Okay, I will email that to you soon, like maybe not tomorrow, but Monday. Okay. Oh, no. Mm-mm. So that's what it will look like. Yeah. I can email it to you. I can also print off a bunch of them, and then you don't have to print it yourself at home. I can print them and have them next week. I'll do that. All right, let me do that. All right. Okay, now we're going to officially start. All right, if you go back to tab 1, page 1, and just good news, I don't sit here and read this whole thing to you because I know you can read. But I like to highlight, just touch on things that I feel like are, the most important things and things that I want to make sure that we go over together. So in talking about having an introduction to job searching, see, they want me to use one mouse on 2 screens and keep track of where it is. It challenges me. John used to sit in here and man one screen, but he doesn't anymore. Okay. So we want to talk about having a strategic job search versus any old job search. So I'm a planner, an organizer, and I think those are two real key things to having a strategic job search is having a plan about what you need to do, when you can do it, and how to get it done, and then setting all that into a plan. So I'm going to tell you about something that's not in your handout here if you want to make a note of it. Many years ago, had a client, a man who was an adult with ADD, and he sold advertising for the Sacramento Bee. And because he had ADD, he had a filing system that was amazing. It was in the trunk of his car. And he had color-coded things from this box, went into this box, and went into that box, and he rotated things from the boxes all the time because in his mind, that was his orderliness. And he showed me pictures of his garage. Every cabinet in his garage had a label on it and a poster, told him what was in there, because he said that like almost wrecked his marriage, that garage. And then he had posters that told him by season what to do. I mean, he recognized his challenge and he took care of it, but it became so large in his life that he couldn't function in it. I mean, the system in the trunk of his car was amazing. And so he started looking around for some sort of a planning calendar to use, and he found one that you can only buy online. It's not sold in any stores. And for people who are challenged by organizing and planning, it is a remarkable tool. For people who love organizing and planning, it is a remarkable tool. So I'm going to tell you the name of it. It's called Planner Pad, Planner Pad, P-A-D, and you can find it at plannerpad.com. So if you're interested in it, I use it. I'll show you mine. If you want to learn more about it, I'm not going to talk about it right now, but it just really, their claim is that they will help you find a minimum of an extra hour every day because of their organization system. And there's no planners that you can go to Staples or anywhere and get that's even like it. So it changed his life, saved his marriage. Okay. So the whole thing about being strategic and having your plan and setting your plan, and especially getting a start on it before you're actually in your job search process. Next point on here is having a willingness to commit the necessary time to your job search. How much time is it? Unfortunately, that answer is different for every single person. You know, 8 resumes sent out, you get an interview. Actually, there is a statistic. It's about 10 to 1 for about every 10, and now it's kind of increased to about 12. But statistically, for every resume you send out, every 10 to 12 resumes, you'll get one interview. You know? So when you figure that out, like one time decades ago, I asked a student, how many interviews do you hope to have next week? Well, how do I know? I'm not in charge of that. You know, I'm like, no, you are in charge of that. How many interviews did you have last week? Well, none. How many resumes did you send out? Well, none. I could still remember that. Okay, so you're going to hit your goal, right? Your goal is 0. You're going to hit it. And so if you know there's a statistic, like my kid's always quoting statistics to me, and that's like the course I loved the most in school, statistics, you know? I'm like, I know about statistics.
Statistically speaking.
Yeah, so then I get into standard deviation and, you know, statistically significant and all that kind of stuff. But you know, statistics exist. So if they say it takes every 12 resumes you send out to get one interview, if you hope to have one interview in some week, you know, you got to send out 10 or 12 resumes, right? So just having a willingness to commit the time, and that takes a lot of time.
I knew some people that were sending resumes like every week, about 70 or 100. Like it was kind of family, like brothers and sisters, they were helping each other.
Yeah.
This is completely the way. That was too much. But this is what they did. They were applying for state job.
I was just going to say, I was going to ask you, was it for the state? That's number one. And we're going to talk about applying to the state. There's definitely some tricks you need to know because it's not exactly how they present it on their new website, which is far more beautiful thing than what they used to have. But if you find yourself sending out tons of resumes and you're not even getting a phone call, then it's time to look at your resume. Okay, so something is amiss there. Okay. That's the first thing I wanted to say. 60 or 70. Oh, let's look at that resume. All right. The resolve to follow through. You know, what happens when you get a bunch of rejection? How are you with that rejection? When I first started working in this field, it was at a college. I lived in Phoenix, and one person asked me, like, how many rejection, you used to get rejection letters back then. Now they don't even send you an email. You never hear from them. How many rejection letters am I going to get? I'm like, I don't know, enough to wallpaper your bathroom, but you got to get through all those no's to get to your yes. And the no's vary from person to person. So, you know, it's like, well, what are you, if you aren't looking for a job and you need one or want one, if you're not looking for one, what else are you going to be doing? So,
Sometimes I think it's not just you. Sometimes it's on the second end. Maybe it's something about them.
yeah.
Because I was applying for some job, for example, hostess. It's just a simple job, like a part time, and I had a good experience. I knew that I have good experience, and the position always opens. They always have opening. I was like it's, and I think something wrong with just what they're looking for. I just maybe it's. I just was thinking maybe it's their problem. Maybe they
Yeah, sometimes it is.
so
Yeah. I met a lady like a couple of years ago. She was in her 80s when I met her. And she told the story how she had applied for the same job at the same place because she really wanted it 13 times. 11 years, 13 times in 11 years. And after the 11th time she went or applied, she said, I'm going there. She went there and she got to speak to somebody that mattered. And she said, why don't you ever call me in for an interview? I mean, she was really old when that happened. So I was like, you know, in a way, she's like, I don't care anymore. I'm going. And they just told, I can't remember what she said was the reason, but she just kept applying. And so 2 more times, magic 13, and she got an interview and she got the job and she worked there forever. So, uh-huh. Yeah, it was just the craziest thing, but
I thought if she would get disappointed.
no, she like never gave up. She was amazing. Okay, next here is to have a specific job goal. Sometimes, you know, when we're starting out, we think like, well, I'll do anything, or I can do anything, or I'd be open to everything. And that can actually be kind of a trap. So it's actually the best thing to start with a more narrow, specific type of job that you're targeting. And after a little while, which, you know, depending on how busy you're working at it, could be a few hours or a few days, or, you know, definitely if you're getting into a few weeks and you just have this more narrow, then you can branch out a little. But it's good to start with something more narrow because in the beginning of a job search, a lot of times we're still learning, we're still gathering information. And today we're actually going to talk about some ways to start now gathering information about different types of jobs and what jobs look like according to different job titles. So really starting out more specifically and getting real clear to yourself about what you want to look for will be a bit of a less frustrating way to get started. Next is to have a clear understanding of your skills and abilities. And the reason is because you want to make yourself as competitive as possible. You know, it's like you want to make sure that you can express the benefit in an interview to a potential employer, the benefit of hiring you. Why should I hire you? And if you're not really clear about that,
If you don't know yourself, how can you sell yourself?
exactly. It's like going, you'll hear me give this example, but it's like you decide you're going to get a new refrigerator. So you go to Sears down to the lower level, and what do you see? Like 30 refrigerators. Like, where do you start? Well, first of all, you start thinking, it makes you start thinking, well, like, what features do I want? Well, sure would be nice if the ice cube came out the door, then I don't have to fill the tray, crack the ice, and blah, blah, blah. So that's a benefit to me, whatever that benefit is, how you perceive it. And so that's what we'll talk about in particular is this concept of features and benefits. Features of you, things you have to offer, hard skill, soft skill, whatever it is, and the benefit to that potential employer. You want to plant that idea of that benefit to them through your interviewing. You can plant that in your letters, you can plant that through your resume, and that's what makes you competitive, is to be able to tell the employer the benefits. Like, why should you hire me? Well, here's a benefit. Here's another benefit. Here's another benefit. Next on the list here says, understand effective job search methods. What are they? How do I do them? Blah, blah, blah. So that's what the whole 7 weeks here is about, is understanding all the parts of your job search and talking together about how you will implement some certain thing in your own job search process, because they'll all vary, just as varied as each person is. How you're going to approach things and do things will be similar because it's sort of classic ways to do things, but you'll have your own spin on that. Next is networking. We talked a little bit about that, and we will definitely talk about that more. It's just the way, and it's going to stretch some people to get out and do things that maybe you haven't done before, get out and have conversations with people that you normally wouldn't have. It's sort of like being in an elevator and deciding you're going to have a conversation instead of stare at the numbers as the floors pass by, you know?
That's always the weirdest thing in the elevator when there's other people. So just like,
But wow, what do you have right there? You have like a little audience.
I just noticed a lot of people like in cafe like Starbucks. It's easy to start conversation. Like usually like lots of web designer, graphic designer, programmists even, and you can. I mean, it's easy to start conversation. It's possible.
It is.
Yeah, but like, and because otherwise in elevator, nobody like, I don't know where's elevators here.
Well, but you can start a conversation with someone and they don't really have to know what you know. But we'll talk, we'll work on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Resumes and cover letters. There's different types of resumes to use, and we'll talk about the specific format of resumes. I find overall to use a little bit different sort of a format here for OSC students than might be real more traditional, works better for career changers. So we have what's called the chronological style. I'm sure you've heard of that as your jobs in reverse chronological order. And then there's one called a functional resume, which doesn't even really focus on job titles or dates. It focuses on your skills. That's kind of a red flaggy sort of resume. Like, what are they trying to hide? And then there's one called a combination resume. It's kind of a blend of both. But I also find that it's really important on your resume to have the top half of your first page just have all the hard-hitting information about you that you want to sell about yourself. And so we just really get that up there and not let a lot of that good information be buried, like on page 2 at the bottom in some job description from 15 years ago. So when we get to resumes, we'll have sample resume structure for you to follow so you can see in what order you want to list all these sections on your resume, and we'll work together to get all that information up on the top of your resume. And the next thing on here is stories. These are your examples of things from your work experience that you have to tell to support what you're talking about, because you just have your words to use in an interview, right? To help create a picture for the person interviewing you to like see you at work. Like, if you did this in a previous work experience, then you'll do it that way here. So we definitely spend a good amount of time, even starting today, on developing your stories. And the thing about doing this in advance, you know, let's say they ask you a question about being in a situation of conflict with a coworker. What happened? What steps did you take? What was the outcome? You have a good story about that, you can use that anywhere, right? It doesn't have to match the job you're interviewing for. It just has to be an example that supports what you tell. So if you take time to get your stories and your examples really written out and nailed down and refined because you practice, you're ready to go. You can answer that question in any interview for any sort of job. And last here is in interviews, informational interviews that Isaac talked about in the beginning, and then your job interviews. So at the bottom of page 1 here, gosh, we're already on page 1 at the bottom. How to find jobs. I want you to just look through that list really quickly. What is listed next to number 1? Networking, because that is the number 1 way still that people get jobs.
I think when I think about it, it's probably because when you actually talk to somebody, they get, instead of just seeing stats and info on a paper, they get a feel for the actual person and whether
Right.
or not they like them in their company.
Right.
So it's not just dry, fast, and really you have no idea what they really mean.
Right. And you can go to an informational interview and you want to be prepared to be interviewed, because what if they're sitting there thinking, oh, I really like this person? And they say, while you're here, I'd like to take you to meet so-and-so.
Right.
Well, you know it's going well,
You're
right?
Like, all right.
Yeah. And also, just like to follow up on what Isaac is saying, if you can start doing some informational interviews before you leave, how nice it is, because we'll talk about how to keep these are contacts, how to keep these contacts warm so that once you've met them, they're not dead to you. Keep them warm so you can get back to them again. How nice to pick up the phone and say, you know, this is maybe your second or maybe even your third time talking to them. And you say, hey, I just want to get in touch with you because guess what? I just graduated last week. They've already met you. They already know you. It's a real different sort of a, you know, process to be able to call somebody and remind them and say hello again versus the first time. So we'll be covering that. So you see, number 1 is network. These are in order of percent of success. What's the last one, number 10? Yes. So look through all of these, you know, at some other time other than right now, but remembering that networking is number 1. All right, next page, page 2. So these are just some of the different components of a job search. And I'll just let you run your eyes down that list because we have already talked about, just mentioned both of them, all of them, I mean, there's more than 2. Now I just want to take you through a little scenario. If you think to yourself like, geez, I don't graduate for like 3 months, why should I start any of my job search now? So I'm going to read this to you and I want you to just listen to the tone of voice, okay? Why start now? Option number 1 is the traditional methodology. Go to school, study hard, master the material, graduate, then start looking for a job, find an employer, submit an application, hope to get an interview, hope to do well in the interview. Maybe the interview didn't go as well as you'd hoped. Wait a few weeks to hear back, find another employer, and keep repeating the same steps and mistakes. Get discouraged, depressed, hanging out at home too much, maybe have to take any old job. So I'm not going to ask for a show of hands if anybody's ever felt like that in a job search, but people do. And so here's option number 2. Start your job searching immediately, master all aspects of your job search, have employers lined up before you graduate, employers you have met and who know you and were impressed by you when they met you because you were well prepared. They'll be eager to speak with you when you're ready to apply for a position. This is what you'll learn here and why we start now. So that just follows along with what we were just talking about a moment ago. And just keeping those contacts warm is really the name of the organization game here. So talk about first things first. And again, that goes back to something that I just hope to give you a suggestion of at the very beginning, and that is to have in your mind to commit like 1 hour a day to your job search activities. So, and like, you know, some things will be 15 minutes, not really a whole hour, and other things might take 30 or 40 minutes. I don't know, something might take an hour, but to just kind of give yourself that encouragement to do that. I know everybody needs to be more busy, huh? It's not like being a student isn't enough. Okay, next page. Top of page 3 talks again about stories and examples, and we're going to get into that a little bit more today, so I'm just going to sort of gloss over it except to say one thing. You always want your stories and examples to come from work experience, but every once in a while you might not have something from previous work experience from which to draw a story or an example. So you might have to branch outside of that a little bit. So think of things that you enjoyed, things that you did really well, things that had an outcome that you were proud of the result of, because maybe something that would fit into a story. Maybe you had a project you worked on in your community and the results were outstanding, if you do say so yourself, and you were in charge, but maybe you had a little conflict with somebody along the way and you had to resolve that. So sometimes you can get more than one story out of one incident or one situation as well. And the best way you know that you're going to use that in interviews because you thought of it in advance. Oh, I could use that story here and here. So sometimes you got to branch out a little bit. So you can go to maybe things that you did with kids' activities when they were in school, or civic activities you were involved with, or clubs, or some sort of community organization, fundraiser. I mean, it can just be such a variety of things that you can draw your examples from. So there's just a short list there on the bottom of the page that you can look through if you need to sort of step outside of that box of work experience to draw from. All right, next page, page 4. There on the top part of the page is talking about, we're going to talk about creating your stories, your examples. And there's a format that you can that you can use to help you set up your stories. And, you know, a lot of times we talk about thinking outside the box. Well, this is a time I want to sort of encourage to think inside the box. And that's by using a process or a format that helps you put your stories together. So the one we use here is called the PAR process. P is for problem, A, actions, and R is for the results. So it's not always a problem. Not everything's a problem you're going to talk about. Sometimes it's a situation you were in or a challenge that you faced. Okay, so P stands for problem, situation, or challenge. And then the actions that you took. This is about your role, not really in an interview to talk about the role or things other people did, but to talk about what you did. And then the results. The results are the outcomes of your efforts. That's what they really want to hear about. So, you might have heard of this type of format to use called STAR, STAR, and that's situation or task. It's the same as the P part. And there's another one called CCAR, CCAR. I don't remember what it stands for, but you might have heard different acronyms, but it's basically the same sort of process to use. So we'll keep that in mind as we move along. And actually, we're just going to flip right over to page 6. And we're going to work on one of these a little bit. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I like to take time in every workshop to start working on something that is going to be a topic that we're going to go on with that's going to build into the next topic, because I'm a firm believer in a couple of things. One, if we start it during the time we're together, it's more likely that you remember it and go back and work on it between now and the next week. And you know, it's better to do something with what you're hearing about than to just sit and look at it. So here's the PAR format. And I want to point you to the top of this page. You see a list here. This is a list of companies that were surveyed, I think it was 2014. 400 online companies were surveyed asking what are important soft skills that you believe people need to have in order to be successful in your company. And so, does everybody know soft skills from hard skills? Hard skills are like the technical things you do in your work, and the soft skills are the characteristics about you, the traits, abilities. Sometimes they're just inherent traits that we're born with, inherent abilities. Others, you know, we've honed them over time, but they're more the characteristics about you that help you get those hard skills done. So they were asking about soft skills, and here's a list that from all the results of surveying these 400 companies, these were the overwhelming soft skills that were noted. And so as you move through looking at your soft skills, and as you start looking at job descriptions, you'll see a lot of these on them. And you'll see other things that will be important that you won't find in this list as well. But I have this list in here just as a starting place for you working on using this PAR format. So something else I want to point out that's really not on this list, but I've been reading a lot about it and hearing a lot about it. Companies are kind of stymied in how to assess in an interview a person that they might hire that will come in and really be engaged in their company. So this concept of being engaged or engagement is kind of a big word, a big concept being pushed around out there right now because, and it is in particular, close your ears, Isaac, for the younger set, like people in their 20s, you know, the younger workforce, that they may come in and do a great job and fulfill all the tasks and roles in their job, but they're looking for people that'll come in and really engage with the company, like have the company's interest at heart, go above and beyond their job. So, you know, it's kind of like a two-edged sword though, right? Some of us in this room are old enough to remember the days when companies really had an allegiance to their employees, and that's kind of like gotten sucked out. Some of you are here because of that. So, but that's what they're looking for. So I don't know, are we about to cycle back to that again? You know, it would be really nice. But they're looking for ways to assess that. And so in your examples from your previous work life, you can start to talk about things like that, things that you did that went above and beyond, or things that you took to the next level, or things that you had the initiative to start up. Things like that go over very big and positively in the interviewing, and how you can capture that on your resume and squeak a little of it into your cover letter. So there's just a sample of some of the most current things being sought after.
Interesting, because I actually, part of my thing that I was doing at the workshop, one of the things I said was that I am very big on being on time, because both the company's time and people's time in this field are very valuable, and you never know, like being late, what kind of impact that will have on the company's schedule with everything they have to get done. And because just being like 10 minutes late can set off a whole chain of events for the company that messes their whole day up.
Yep. Yep. So to point out that you have an awareness about that, and you tell them that that's a strength that you have to offer, is being on time. You know, and it's the things that you read in the job description that are like that. It's amazing to me to read in a job description that they put that strongly worded about being on time. It's like, really? And it's like a main point. But it's probably pointing more of a finger toward younger generation. So we just have to keep that in mind and use it to our advantage. Okay, so on the bottom of page 6 is a spot for you to work right now on one story or example. And then I'll just say that page 7 and 8 on the back side of that page, next page also, this is an example of page that you can just keep copying over and over and over as you begin to work on your stories and start having stories ready for different soft skills that are being sought after that you come across in job descriptions you look at. It's not too early to start looking at job descriptions, even though you're not job searching. Ones that you find that you think, wow, that job sounds good and I feel qualified for it, print it. Keep it in a notebook so you can keep going back and looking. It will help you know stuff to put on your resume and be ready to talk about in an interview. So what I would like for you to do right now, we're just going to spend like 2 minutes. I'd like you to look through this list from the 400 companies at the top of the page and pick one that really stands out to you where you say to yourself, yes, I have a good story to tell that would support that. I have a strength in this area. I have a good experience in that area. And whichever one you pick, I would like you to go to the bottom of the page and write a note to yourself about what it was in the box that has the P next to it. So you're identifying to yourself the problem or the situation or the challenge that you found yourself in. Make a note that will help you remember, like who you worked for, where it was, what you were doing, whatever note you need to make for yourself. And I know people will move along at different paces in our group here. So if you have, some people need to sit and think for a couple of minutes, like, what am I going to talk about? And some people will have something that'll just pop into your mind right away. And you might even start to fill in a little more information about the problem, situation, or challenge. You might even move on to the actions. What sort of actions did you take to whatever the situation was? Remedy it, fix it, stop it. And what was the outcome? And remember, this is about you. This is about the part you played, not other people in it. And while you're writing too, and you have this extra sheet in here, and then photocopy some more of them, keep your job search binder in a handy place, because as you maybe start to think of this through the week, something else might pop into your mind, and then you have a place to go and open your binder right away and make a note to yourself so you have another one to work on. Because I don't know if you're like me, 5 minutes later, you probably think, I don't even remember what I was thinking about. All right, we're going to go on. Just remember that you've started making some notes to yourself, and you can come back to this. And we're going to talk about the master job application. So that starts on page 9. And again, as I mentioned, this is just a place to start gathering all the information that you might ever need to put on an application, whether it's online or a paper application. I haven't really had anybody tell me they filled out a paper application in a while, but I think this is still valuable to have, because it's just a place to gather all those little pieces of information that might be sort of nagging at the back of your brain. So I encourage you to use a pencil, so that if things change or you have to change something, you don't have a lot of scribble. You can just erase and rewrite things. And fill out your application with most current things first and work backwards, sort of like chronological resume. And let's just turn to page 10, and just going to run through a few parts, not the whole thing. Just a couple things I want to highlight. In the second box down that starts with position sought, it asks you underneath that desired pay range. A lot of times, we don't want to, oh, if I put too much, then they won't hire me. If I put too little, they'll think I don't think I'm good enough. And so we get tempted to put things like negotiable or whatever, but you may, if you haven't yet seen, I know you will see application instructions that tell you if you don't fill in a number, they won't consider your application. I mean, it's like downright dirty out there now, it's like they're mean. But we're going to talk in a few minutes about how, if you're not sure like what to put in that box, where you can go to search out information, salary information in your area. So I just want to encourage you to know that, sometimes they're going to tell you right out, you got to put a dollar amount in there. So you can put a range. People like to put things like commensurate with position in this geographic, they get real geographic area, real flowery and stuff like that. But do your research so you can put a range in there. Next, you see a section here to put previous addresses for the past 5 years. Then I'm going to have you look at the next page over, 11. At the bottom, there's another section that says 10 years. Why do you think they want to know what your addresses were over a period of time? It's not so much where you lived, but what are they looking at?
Then you'll be there for a long period. They're not hiring somebody who's going to be like, oh, they're gone now.
Yeah, what if you've got like 12 different places you lived in the last 3 months, like Something might not be real stable about that person. So it's not really where you lived, it's a pattern that you're showing. Okay, list all of your schools attended. Again, start with your, well, that's going to be on application here. I guess I don't have it in that order I just said, huh? High school, you don't need any high school information if you have schooling beyond high school, which applies to everyone in this room. So, well, 1:30, but it'll be a little later. But if you have to go at 1:30, I understand. Other days we're more on time, but week one we're not. We are 20 minutes. So beyond high school, I mean, once you have gone to school beyond high school, you don't need to have high school on your resume, but you do need to fill that in on your job application. Okay, so I just want you to know, however you choose to handle it, it's illegal actually to ask what year you graduated from high school, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they'll be counting on their fingers and toes. How old is that person? So usually you'll see when you graduated, that box is blacked out or not even there. But if it is, you choose. Are you going to answer that or not? I always say there's a certain point in time where you can actually make yourself look 5 to 10 years younger than you are on a piece of paper, but one day that catches up with you. I used to be excited about that. Now I'm beyond that point. I can't hide that anymore. So no matter how you count it, she worked a long time. So, but just know that if you leave it blank, you have every right to do that. They should not be asking that, because some of us are concerned about that age discrimination thing. Okay, and so then any schooling that you've had beyond high school, you don't even need to list on your resume in particular, but here's a place, and maybe you have more schooling than there's room, so just grab another sheet of paper and stick it in your notebook and go ahead and capture the same information. Up here on the top of page 11, describe extracurricular community or civic activities and hobbies. You know, every once in a while that is still asked about. I just want to say, don't talk about like that you parachute jump, that you jump out of airplanes, because what goes on in their mind? Oh, big medical bills, right? So stay away from things that could scare them if they offer benefits. You know what I mean? Put safe things, even though you want them to know you're a daredevil. Describe special skills, transferable skills, and computer skills. You want to be really, really thorough on this part because, you know, back in the old days when we were children and we started working, it was a given that you knew how to write with a pen or a pencil on a piece of paper, right? Now it's a given that you have certain level of computer skills just to get through your day. So I thought I was kind of a hot shot on Word and PowerPoint until I came to work here, because I only did it for myself before. I've like written curriculum forever. Oh man, I need to go to school here because I am no hot shot. And now with all this Windows 10 stuff and wrecking all your Word, oh my golly, every other day I'm like, Jeff, Sanjay. So what you can really put down under your computer skills section, even though they're asking and they're telling you exactly what you need to have, the lists on the job descriptions are getting longer and longer and longer. So this is an opportunity, even while you're here, to start looking at some of the job descriptions. And if there's some program they're asking for that we offer here, but that is not your best, you have an opportunity here to work on it a little bit. So if you fall into that category, just let me know about it and I'll help you make an arrangement to even get a little extra learning time in on it if it's not a part of your program, because this is just a chance for you to get a little work on that and really work on your typing speed too. Really getting that up there so that I just was working with a woman that came in this morning who's a distant student, but she came down here and her typing speed is, and in her area for schooling, it needs to be like double what she is right now. So a lot of times they tell you that you have to submit your certificate, your typing certificate with your application. So really be working on that if you've sort of been setting it aside to wait, but you really need time to work and build and build and build on that. The next two questions on here are very personal, but they do come up. And if anything like that is in your past, this is something that we take off and talk about privately if you have something that you want to talk about or need to talk about. Have you ever been discharged from a position, fired, basically forced to resign? Have you ever been convicted of a crime? The two things that are the most important here, one is that if you have a situation like that in your background, number one, own it. It happened. And number two, that you can relay something that you learned from it, that you used it as a learning experience in your life. And these are, especially the first one, like, ever losing a job that way. It's a negative question. And for all negative questions, you want to anticipate them and you want to be able to answer them, turn them quickly into what you learned from it, talk about it really short, and move on. So and when we get into the interviewing part, we'll be talking more about that in depth. And again, like I said, if any of these situations fall into your past experience and you want to work on how you're going to respond to that, let me know. I have a student recently who she had like 6 jobs in 2.5 years. And she had like no idea how she was going to express that. But you know what? She hit a rough place in life and went through a bad period, ended a marriage, and then was very ill through it and not readily able to find out what her illness was. And it took a lot of work and time on her part. So she just had a hard time for a while, and she just really needed to sit down and talk about the words that she was going to use. But she just owned it, and she talked about how the things are resolved and she's ready. And she just had an interview on Thursday, which was like totally out of the blue and surprised her. And so today's actually the day she's supposed to hear back. So again, that's just about practice, 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 being prepared. Next page, 12. This is a place where you can start listing your different jobs that you've had. And again, start with your current or most recent job first and work backwards in time. And again, you can photocopy these sheets. If you need to add more, or you want to go ahead and photocopy just so you can add more sheets in here from the get-go, then you can just keep these historically over time and keep adding to them for each job you have starting soon and on into your future. Okay, on page 15, I know this is a lot of stuff. We're going lickety-split. On 15 here, I want to talk about a website that is just so full of information. It'll just become your research friend. It's called ONET Online, and there is the web address right there at the top. It's onetonline.org, and it is produced by the Bureau of Labor. So the Bureau of Labor also produces that big old thick book called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And it's got like 15, 16, 1,800 information about like 1,800 different jobs in it. And so many years ago, of course, they started their online version, and now it gets updated regularly. The online version, where the book only gets updated every 2 years. So this is a place that you can go to gather lots of different types of information. But when you bring this website up, on the home page in the upper right corner, there's a browser box, and you can put in a job title up there. So I'm going to pick on bookkeeping. So you might just put in there bookkeeping, and then a page will come up, and what you're going to find there, the very first thing you're going to find is alternative job titles. I have somebody that I've been working with who's been keeping a list of all the job titles, who's also in bookkeeping, been keeping a list of all the job titles that he comes across that have bookkeeping function in them. His list has 23 job titles on it. It's just, accounting technician, simple things like accounts payable, but that's related to bookkeeping. So if you get in your mind that it's bookkeeping and that's the only thing you ever look up, there's 22 other job titles that he's found so far that are relative. So that's the first thing you'll see is a section that has alternative job titles or sample job titles. And so I just want you to get familiar with all the different boxes of information, sections of information down the page. It'll give you information about things that you do most typically on a daily basis in a job like that. Training that you need to get going, training that you need to keep going and build your career, skills that you need to have, soft skills that are important, like good listening or whatever it is. So there's lots of information. And a very, very important section is all the way down at the very bottom of this very long page. It's where you get to information for your state. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that when you finish school, you're probably still going to be living in California. But if you're moving to Idaho, you can look up Idaho from there. So you get all the way down, you pick your state. And what you find there is information about the growth prospects of that job into the future, the coming few years into the future. You find wage information. You find the mean wage and the median wage. So you can find that range that when they ask you the salary range you're looking for, that's where you can get your range information from for each job. So get really familiar with it. And because it is valuable, this is what I'm going to ask you to work on between now and next week is to go to onetonline.org. And if you'll turn the page, next page, backside is blank, but go on to page 17. At the top it says Occupation Exploration. So I'd like you to pick a job title that you're interested in for the future and put it up here on the top line, job profile for, you might say, accounting, bookkeeping, whatever, web design, IT, whatever it is that you want to look at. And then this is a handout that's on the front side and back side of this page. And each of these boxes that you see follows the sections on ONET Online. So you don't have to go hunting all over the place and scroll up and down. At least the last time I looked. Uh-oh. We lost. There we go. Okay. Oh, seeing this thing, it doesn't keep up with me. Still talking about master job application. So another thing that I want to say about ONET Online is if you'll turn to the back side of this handout and look down at the last two boxes, they are actually not a part of what you'll find on ONET Online, but I just thought this is a good place to capture this information. And so the second to the last box, sorry, let me start over. The second to the last box, wages and employment trends, is on there. And I just like you to write underneath there CA to remind yourself to go all the way down to the bottom and look for California. CA for California. Unless you're going to move somewhere else. The next to the last box on page 18, wages and employment trends. I don't know, anybody moving after you're finished with school, moving to another state? Maybe. So then you could use ONET Online to look up the same type of job information, but by a different state. Here's a story I have to tell about that. You know, you're getting old when you got a story to tell about everything. Many years ago, I had, this was one of those somebody who knew somebody's story. So I'm working with adults with Asperger's, and somebody knew somebody who knew me. Well, and asked me if I would work with their daughter. She didn't have Asperger's, but she needed some job search help. And you know what? She was like the cutest thing on 2 feet. Her parents had just spent $31,000 for 18 months for her to go to medical assisting schooling program. $31,000. And she couldn't find a job. And she was like so marketable. So we worked on her resume. We did all our interviewing practice. She and I went out together like 2 days. I can remember it because it was cold and rainy and windy. We went out like up there in Citrus Heights to all the medical offices up there, you know, and she went in, she had her little her little spiel ready, and she'd hand her resume, and she was like 22 years old, just like as cute as she could be. So everybody wanted to engage in a little conversation with her. Everybody was really nice to her, but she didn't get any interviews. Because you know what? And this is when I was first learning about ONET Online, and I went and I looked, and guess what? There's like no job growth in that type of a job in California. But you want to go be a medical assistant like in South Dakota, they're like giving bonuses to move there to be that because they need them. So what you want to do and where it's available, you know. I had a student, not here, but at another school, turned down a fabulous job with an unbelievable offer, but in his mind, it wasn't enough to support his 5 children. So, you know, it's not about wasn't about the job wasn't enough for him. It's what it paid. So learn these things so that one, you're prepared and you're not disappointed. You know, sometimes it's a little bit of a eye opener, like, really? It might be that wage. And then you got to throw our economy on top of that, right? I've watched, not like I'm picking on bookkeeping, Donna, sorry, but from like 6 years ago, I've watched that salary in that industry come down like 25, 30%. Just a traditional, not even full charge bookkeeper, but kind of like accounts payable, accounts receivable, or more, 17.50 to 19 an hour. And now they're rocking around 13.50 to 14.50 an hour. So I like to help you. It's like, that's the bad news, but be prepared for that sort of thing so that you just don't get blown away all of a sudden at the last minute. And the other thing you're going to notice when you go on ONET Online, just really quickly, when you put in your job title, and on the first page that comes up, there's going to be a whole long list of jobs, and you're going to look at them and you're going to think to yourself, how on earth did that job get in that list when I put bookkeeping up there? It'll be like geographic oil digger. And you'd be thinking like, what? Well, these jobs that come up, and then you'll find ones that are related to what you put in, but these jobs that come up are based on something different than the job. They're based on literally decades of research that started with a man named John Holland, who is like the grandfather of all career assessments. They're based off these things called Holland codes. I'm not going to get into that right now. You can look it up on Wikipedia. It's a great article. But these are jobs that people have who, based on other people who have had jobs as bookkeepers, characteristics about themselves, and they said, these are like my soft skills, and I'm a bookkeeper, and I like that work. So it's more based off, a lot of those jobs that come up are more based off a people's characteristics than actually the functions of a job. But as you go on down that page more, then you'll see things specifically related. But I just want to warn you, lest the first thing you see is like, what? So one thing that you'll see on the list of jobs are little symbols out to the right. And so there's 3 symbols that they use. One is a little yellow sunshine. Another is the word bright, B-R-I-G-H-T, and it's in yellow. And then a little green energy sign. So if you see one that has a sunshine, it means that over the coming years, like the next few years, there is anticipated good growth in that job, in that career field. If you see the word bright, it means exceptionally good growth anticipated. And the little green energy sign is noting that in this job, this type of work, because of technology, there are anticipated changes coming in how that job will be done. And so that doesn't necessarily, it can imply growth, but not necessarily. It can just mean changes. So when you see jobs that have the little sunshine and the word bright and the little green thing, go for those. And so when you get to your California wage information, it will tell you the projected growth for the state. And so you'll notice that there's times that for our state versus what's listed on the top of that first home page can be really different. And that's because it's going to be different in the state than it is nationally. Right. Yeah, so be sure and get into the state breakdown because, that's where you're going to learn the most applicable things. And I always encourage people, really shoot for the things that are projecting in our state, not federal, but in the state, like 13, 16, and on up to like 20% growth, okay? The things that are down with like a 3 next to them when you get to the state, it's not going anywhere. So start with the higher ones. Again, it's like having a specific job goal. Maybe after a few weeks, you realize you got to branch out a little more. Okay. I mean, don't shy away from pursuing something, but know what those numbers and symbols mean to you.
Also, it's like something if you having something more specific, like maybe start out like maybe if it's something you're more comfortable with, start out with something that has maybe the lower, but be aware that you maybe might need to move on to something later on that has a higher growth.
No, I want to say the opposite. I want to make sure we're understanding each other. Shoot for the ones that have the higher percentage of growth targeted, like 20%. Go for it. versus 3%. That means there's not much growth anticipated. Maybe it's like turnover position, somebody quits, dies, or decides to go home mad, and now the position is open again. But the other ones are growing. So, there will be more jobs, maybe more interesting jobs, have a little bit different angle to them, because those are the jobs you can really engage in because they're growing. The company might be growing. Okay, on to page 19. Now we're into, this is just a little bit about time management. Oops. See, I need one of those clickers that's not tethered to the computer.
Like the radio signal.
Just a little handheld one with no. Okay. What I just want to say about time management, you guys are in school and I know what sort of time and hours and all that you have to keep. So, you know how they say if you're not employed and you want to be, spend 40 hours a week looking for a job. Well, okay, let's be truthful. That doesn't typically happen that way. But realistically, do things like your paperwork and your research at night, where you got your daylight hours to get out when businesses are open, especially if you're going to get out and do some networking and do some informational interviews. Because you know what? We can tell someone, we can tell our friend the next day, like, I looked for a job all night. You got your jammies on in front of the computer and it's 3 a.m. and it's truthful, you did. But I think just in a classic sense, daytime hours to get out and try to meet people and just take yourself out places to network. We're going to talk about having a goal of networking. Like tomorrow you wake up and you say, today I'm going to network with one person. We're not going to say 10. We're going to say one person. Because if that's not you naturally, you have to work at it. But the place we start doing that is here, right? All right, let's go on to the next page here. When I first wrote this so many years ago, I had in here like collect quarters so you can use the pay phone during your lunch break to make phone calls. Pay phones, like my kid would say, pay phone, what's that? Okay, page 20, 10 tips for effective job searching. Let's just run through these really quickly. First of all, I encourage you to set up a place wherever you live, your own space to do your job search. And if you don't have that space because somebody's going to get into it and take your pens or take your paper or whatever, then get a box that's big enough to fit what you will need, or a crate or something that you can tuck away and nobody's going to get into your stuff. Because what happens? We sit down, we start. First of all, sometimes we really got to work ourselves up mentally and emotionally to start. And we get there and we're ready to go. And then what? Got to go get a pen, or we want to get a drink of water, because we'll use anything to delay doing this. And then if somebody's gotten into your stuff, it's so easy to get up. Okay, well, let me see what's on TV, or let me make that phone call real quick. And I'm going to commit an hour to this. Oh, darn, an hour's up. Okay, so find your spot or a box to keep all your stuff in and that you can pull out. Just have yourself prepared, be ready to go. Set up a record keeping system from the beginning of your search, and in just a minute we're going to go through a few pages for that. I do encourage you to keep a notebook and paper system for your job search records, recordings. A lot of people say, well, gosh, I'll just do that on a computer. It's very organized and it's great, but here's the scenario. You sent out some resumes. One day your cell phone rings. You're not anticipating that it is one of the companies calling you for either a little phone interview or to schedule an interview with you. And what's going on at home? The dog's barking, the kid just threw up on your feet, the TV's blaring away with SpongeBob, and your computer's upstairs and you're downstairs and the wash machine is going, and all you're thinking about is getting to your computer because you want to look up something to remind yourself about the company or about the job description or whatever. You want to get your stuff in front of you. Well, first of all, they hear you running and then you're out of breath and now you're waiting for your computer to boot up. It's a nasty scenario. So I encourage you to to use a paper system so that you can have it in a spot wherever you keep your phone when you're at home, have your job search notebook and a copy of your resume right there so you're ready to roll as soon as they call, because all you got to do is open your notebook, flip to that alphabetical tab where you have the information of who you sent your resume to, and you're on it. You're ready to go. You can have that conversation right away. And there's nothing wrong with saying, oh gosh, I'm so happy that you've called. Will you give me a minute or half a minute to get over to my paperwork? That's far different than, will you give me like 3 minutes to run upstairs and boot up my computer, So that's my plug for paper. All right. The other thing is that if you're not a natural, like on the spot talker, and if you got a phone call like that and you just picked up your phone and you said hello, if you feel like that was going to like throw you over the edge, then let your voicemail take the call. That gives you a few minutes to like be all excited and tell someone and calm down a little bit and get your resume in front of you and be ready.
Okay, call you back. Let's do this.
Yeah, but I want you to make a note here on the left side of your page up by that paragraph that's got the little key. If you are naturally an easy talker, right there, I want you to make a promise to yourself. What is the amount of time that you will let go by and you'll return that phone call? Don't put 24 hours.
Minutes.
Okay, how many minutes? This is a commitment you're going to make to yourself. Because if you're not a natural born talker, it's easy to justify why you let 3 or 4 hours go by. Oh, I'll do these 3 things and then I'll call. Okay. Whatever your number is fine with me. I just want you to make a commitment to yourself.
I mean, the faster you respond to them, the more that shows that you're interested. And that
Yes.
That means the greater the chance that you'll get in with it.
Right.
If the person calls and they call back in 5 minutes, they're like, oh, they just needed a little time to get their stuff together and they're totally interested. It's like, says a lot more than if you wait like 4 hours and then call back. They're like,
exactly. And you know what? Your resume is not the only one on the desk in front of them, right?
They've got other people that they're calling, so if you call back within 5 minutes, that means they haven't really had a chance to call anybody else.
Right.
And that can be a double-edged sword too, though, because if they're trying to reach you and you don't answer, they'll
go on.
They'll go on to the next person who may be that instant talker.
Yeah.
And say, hi, this is Anna. Can I help you? And this is so-and-so. Oh, hi. You can rattle inside, but you can't hear.
Yeah.
And so for me, I would rather pick up the phone. Unless there's a state that I've never applied to that's on my phone